Well, did you make any New Year's resolutions? Oh, heard some visible or audible no's throughout that. There is a test after this, you realize. Well, most of us did, even if we didn't, officially do that. I mean, maybe you spent this week after Christmas seriously evaluating 2024 and determined that you need to do a few things different. Maybe even created a plan and goals for the new year. I know folks who've done that. And kudos to you if you did. I'm proud of you. I didn't write anything down, or at least haven't yet, although I do have a couple of goals identified for 2025. Did you know that statistics show that the top category, and I know you know this, for New Year's resolutions are diet and exercise. Eat less, eat better, take up running. Those top the list. And then when you realize that gyms, exercise places see a reliable jump in membership in January. In fact, Christmas for gym owners is January. They love it. And the next category is money, budgeting, or just plain spending less. Or in our house, eating the leftovers. It's always better fresh to me. It's just hard, but we're trying to discipline ourselves. But this spending less means that we're going to get organized and we're going to pay off credit cards with cash, not other credit cards. And the sad part is that New Year's resolutions have about an 8% chance of being kept. The success rate is abysmal. The gym attendance flattens out, come around the middle of January, 1st of February. The budgeting app that you put on your phone to make sure you track every penny, that winds up on the last screen on your smartphone, and then you forget, what was that? What is that one for? And then pretty soon your phone will tell you never use this, and so you don't want to delete it. So anyway. Have you heard of Quitter's Day? It's coming up. I think it's Friday. Quitter's Day is held on the second Friday in January. It's when people traditionally quit or stop on their New Year's resolutions. So you've got what do we got? 5 more days to hang in there, and then come Friday, let's give it up. Research shows that people quit their resolutions for the year by that second Friday in January. And why is this rhythm that way every year? Why is there this binging and purging around the holidays? We spend and we love it when we're spending, and we eat and we love it when we eat, or when we eat a lot, and when we feast together with family and friends, and then in January we get the credit card bills and we get our cholesterol checked, and we realize that maybe those weren't the best decisions that we made. There's probably a lot of reasons that we can think of for this back and forth, and maybe it's just me. I doubt that it is, though, but sometimes there's this vague sense of guilt around the holidays. I mean, we spend too much. We eat too much. We drink too much. We just plain too much. I mean, that's our pattern. And then we try to level things out and sober up come January and do the right things and the responsible things. But we are very good at feasting. Whether it's on food or any other thing, we tend to enjoy excess. Have you ever felt guilty about enjoying yourself? Have you at Christmas dinner, whenever you're surrounded by people that you love, or maybe you're knee-deep in wrapping presents, and you wonder, how does God feel about this? Do you ever have that nagging uncertainty about, what's God's take on all of this that we do? And at the same time, you're thinking and thanking God for all the blessings that you have, and all these things surrounding you that are so incredible, and you know that the vast majority of the population of the world does not have it nearly as good as you do. It's not even a competition. And do we think maybe that God's just really happy with us when we're somehow restricting or not necessarily punishing, but withholding a few things for ourselves? We get up early, maybe we go to the gym, we give to the needy. And do we think sometimes that maybe God tolerates our good times and our parties if we just offset it with enough, seriousness and tithing and self-denial? The problem with feasting. But look at that passage from Jeremiah. Sing aloud with gladness for Jacob, a great company, they shall return here. Then shall the young women rejoice in the dance, and the young men and the old shall be merry. There's joy, happiness. There's silliness everywhere. There's not a whiff here of guilt or even restraint. I mean, this is a party that Jeremiah is talking about, uncharacteristic for him. This is a vision of God's restoration and of God's over-provision for his people. This is God bringing us together for that enormous meal, that meal of excess, and that's when we're standing knee-deep in wrapping paper and presents. Feasting. Now, there are a lot of Christian disciplines that we should practice. Of course, there's prayer and Bible study and meditation and feasting. I didn't say fasting. Feasting. Feasting. Have you practiced the discipline of feasting? The discipline of singing and dancing and enjoying the abundance of blessing. I thought today might be a good time for a reminder that having a good time is okay. It's even biblical. The book of Jeremiah can be divided roughly in half. The first half is about God's judgment on Israel and the surrounding nation, or using the surrounding nations to bring judgment. Those nations, Assyria and Babylon and others. And then the second half is about God's judgment on those nations. But the whole book is about God's righteous judgment and the need for obedience and transformation. But right in the middle of it, right in the middle, there's this, like a river running through a desert, there's this little section, this book of consolation in Jeremiah. A few chapters here about God restoring Israel and Judah. And most of the verses that you've heard or seen on placards in gift shops and so forth that are taken from the book of Jeremiah are from these chapters. There's not much else that's positive enough that you're going to see it promoted a great deal. But these chapters talk about God's eventual deliverance and his love for the people. They talk about a hope and a future, as you've heard. Jeremiah describes it like this: they shall come and sing aloud on the height of Zion, the highest hill, and they shall be radiant over the goodness of the Lord, over the grain, the wine, the oil, over the young of the flock and the herd, and their life shall be like a watered garden, and they shall never languish again. There'll be a watered garden. They're not going to languish. These are good times. This vision, this garden's water in a dry place, do you think that would mean much to these folks who had heard all of their lives about initially Eden, but then also the time in the desert and the dryness of their lives? Jeremiah is called the weeping prophet, and he's constantly talking about judgment and pain, but suddenly there's this little intermission. Life is never just all one thing, is it? Just whenever we've given in to bitterness or cynicism, pessimism, God breaks through those chains. We end up dumbfounded by good things that we didn't expect. Joy out of nowhere can blindside us. I mean, you're suddenly visited by an old friend, someone that you hadn't contacted or contacted you in forever, and all of a sudden, it's like this breath of fresh air in your life. Or you have a occasion to see a sunset that just stops you in your tracks, and you wonder, oh, what a blessing. Or you have a season of rest and peace after this long trudge uphill. You see, when tests come back negative, and we've got some good news, it's time to feast. It's time to be joyful. The problem of pleasure tells us that God is there all the time, sending love to us even when we don't deserve it. These images of feasting and consolation remind us that that's really what's at the center of our relationship with God. The Trinity, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, are in constant fellowship and joyful fellowship with one another, and that's the way it's supposed to be with us. All of this, the stress and the grief and the death, all that's secondary. It was never meant to be that way. The nucleus of the universe that God created is joy. God looked at God's creation and said, this is good. Here's a pop quiz. What was Jesus' first miracle in the book of John? I mean, Cowboys are out of the playoffs. We can stay here as long as we need to. Somebody needs to say, what? Water to wine? Is that what I heard someone say? Yeah, okay. The first miracle in the Gospel of John is Jesus changing the water to wine. It was to change the necessary, the water, into the unnecessary, to change sustenance into a party, because that's really what's at the center. Jeremiah wrote, "See, I'm going to bring them forth from the land of the north and gather them from the farthest parts of the earth and bring to them the blind and the lame, those with child, those in labor together, a great company. They shall return here." Come on in. You've probably read some of Shel Silverstein's writings. He wrote a poem that kind of describes that gathering, that type of gathering. If you're a dreamer, come in. If you're a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer, if you're a pretender, come sit by my fire, for we have some flax golden tales to spin. Come in, come in. And maybe Silverstein's poem is a little simple. Maybe it's a little too idealistic, but there's truth in there, and it's a deep kind of truth. When God shows up at the party, everyone is included. One of the sure signs of God's presence is that everyone is welcome. People come out of the woodwork, and oftentimes it's people who aren't necessarily welcomed anywhere else. There's a story about a young woman who moved to a new town, and she started looking for a church home, and there were churches of every denomination and every size in the community, and she visited all of them. She didn't really find one that really made her feel at home. He couldn't get that feeling that it just seemed right. And then one day she met an older gentleman in town. She struck up a conversation, and the subject of church came up. And she said, "You've lived here for a long, long time. Which church in town do you think is the best?" And his reply was simple. He said, "I don't know about good, better, or best, but I do know that if you find the one that serves the poor, that's where you'll find Jesus." The dreamers, the wishers, and the magic bean buyers, those whose society doesn't have time for, those who are out on the fringes, usually when we find them around the fire, then Jesus is around that fire too. When we take part in the discipline of feasting, the table has a way of lengthening to welcome all kinds of people. Jeremiah wrote this in a society that was transient and in exile. They had not seen good news in a long time. And his picture of God's party includes all the people that wouldn't have had a place in the society that was there. He pictures a community where those who are discarded or seen as a burden are given a place at the head table. And that's the mark of God's company. That's the mark of the discipline of feasting. Those are the kind of feasts that we should revolve to have every chance we get. And that's the kind of feast we're having at First Presbyterian Church of Plano. When we practice feasting with grateful hearts, we realize that all we have and all we are is from God. And we realize that we're unworthy of our blessings. And that's an incredible gift. And the greatest gifts that we received in this life, the kids, the spouses, other relationships, those are blessings we could never earn. Jeremiah continued, "For the Lord has ransomed Jacob, redeemed him from hands too strong for him." When we realize that these gifts are gifts, then we can hold them with an open hand. We're free to rejoice because we realize that God has redeemed us from hands too strong for us. We're reminded again of the fact that God is in his heaven, and every good and perfect gift is from above, and they're for us. He says, "I'll give the priests the fill of their fatness, and my people shall be satisfied with my bounty." Isn't that a great word, satisfied? In a culture that runs on more and more and more and makes money off dissatisfaction and bad news, we hear about this life that we can live and just be satisfied. The gifts God has given us have always been enough. There's not a lack. And we have to come to a place of realizing that. Think back to your favorite time this past holiday season. Think back of the pleasure that you had and the fact that God shows up and blindsides you with joy. Don't feel guilty about that. We've had a good time, and we've been blessed. Look around you this Sunday morning, and you'll see the miracle of God's kind of party. This is who we are. There are no assigned seats here, although some of you are not quite aware of that. There's no head table or there's no foot table. Jesus sat next to John at the Last Supper. You know who was on the other side? Judas. When God is at the party, there's room for everyone. Everyone has a seat at the feast. 2025 has arrived, and as we head back into real life, I want us to do so with grateful hearts that we have been invited to the feast. It's not too late for a resolution or two. I'd like to see those on my desk in the morning. Seriously, though, one of them that I'm going to make is to find other people who need to feast like we do, and to make sure they're invited, included, and welcome. Would you join me in making that simple resolution? To find other people who need to feast like we do here, and to make sure that they're invited and that they're included and that they know that they're welcome. When we feast like that, there's no hangover, no regret, and we can head back to that grind of life, but we head back refreshed and grateful that we have a seat at this table, at this feast. Thanks be to God. Amen.